Zoe Peterson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I was reflecting right before we hit record that I think I say like I'm really excited for you to be here every single time that I have a guest on. So if I'm going to tell the truth, what I would need to say to you is I'm extra excited for you to be on. And apologies to all the past guests. So I just got to spend the morning going through your work and also getting to know you. We were just in Austin for like a week together. And um, I'm so excited to talk to you because I really feel one in my own life, what you're talking about, what you're teaching, what you're just doing as a lifestyle is so like potent, and I feel like I'm in some way being called to go through a similar initiation that you've been in, and it just feels like profound, honestly.
Hmm.
Like I really feel something that we'll get into, like closing this gap between the intellect and the capacity. Like I feel like this is something in our culture that so many people need help with. So I'm stoked. Um, to start, I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience in the way that you find yourself introducing yourself most in public when people ask, what do you do? Or who are you?
Yeah, I admittedly, that's always a tough question for me. I have bounced between so many fields of work, but my current like, favorite title that I'm playing with is Mad Scientist of Honest Living because that just
Mm,
feels alive for me right now. I'm big on running experiments. I'm big on just letting ourselves be human and imperfect, but being curious about what's out there. So that's been a fun angle for me. But by trade, I am a clinical kinesiologist. I've studied somatic therapy and I work a lot with systems and looking at the world through like a systems theory lens, whether that's generally through the idea of like living systems and ecosystems. So those are my kind of areas of play right now and
mm.
still honing in on what to call that in the title because I
Yeah,
think I'm still making sense of that myself.
yeah. Beautiful. I love that. Mad scientist. What was the other part of that?
Mad scientist of honest living.
Okay, I love that. Um, Random question. I use the word systems a lot as well, and I would consider myself a very system-y kind of person. But for someone listening who maybe is not so familiar with that word and the way that you're speaking to it, like how does a system relate to my individual existence in my life, and why is that important? I'm just super curious. I'm super curious about that.
Yeah, so the idea of systems theory in any field is looking at how things interrelate to each other rather than taking things in isolation. And a
Mm,
lot of the ways that we see certain aspects of like Western society as being broken is because we stopped looking at them as a system. We're looking at our physical health in isolation, like we're trying to like just treat the knee when someone has knee pain. That doesn't work.
mm,
We're trying to like just isolate the neurotransmitters in the brain when somebody feels sad. That doesn't work.
mm.
We have to look at the broader system.
Yeah.
And I grew up out in the woods. My family lineage is literally forest ecologists and like in the like
Wow.
forestry world. And so that was always my lens from a really young age is how does everything interact with each other? And I think
Mm,
we can all find our own ways of doing that, but we all know that when you're having a bad day, everything touches everything. And it goes the other way too. And being able
yeah.
to work with our life in that way of like, what's the bigger system here? And what are all the different levers I could pull? And so when I'm working with systems theory, it's really looking at that of like, how are things interrelated?
Yeah. Okay, beautiful. I love that. So I've only known you for, uh, well, I've only known you in person for like 2 weeks, but I've known you virtually for like a year and a half. But I've gotten to witness your life in an interesting way from afar for about a year and a half or something. And even though I didn't know you before, my sense is that like within these past 2 years or so, you've really hit a new octave in your life. And so I'm really curious to kind of go back in time a bit, maybe to what was the inciting event or because often when we do hit a new octave, there is like chaos or a collapse or something like this that leads to the adaptation. So I know there is a story of living in your car and whatnot, and my sense is that maybe that is like the beginning of this upward spiral of your life. So, can you take us back in time and tell the story of what was happening in your life and kind of this octave change?
Yeah, yeah, I love that language of octave change. I think, like you said, it takes something really hitting us for us to go there. The language I always use with people is like until it shows up in your body, your bank account, or the bedroom, like you're not gonna do anything about it. It's too hard. It's too hard to change. Until it
Yeah,
hits one of those areas, you're not doing shit.
yeah.
So for me, there was, like you said, that was kind of living in the car was the beginning of the upward spiral, but there was a long downward spiral for a while.
Mm,
I got in a car accident 6 years ago, and I was riding a motorcycle. I got hit by a car,
wow.
and the recovery from that was really, really extended. I had a brain injury, and it really imploded my whole life. And I was going to like 9 different types of therapists and healers and practitioners and neurologists, and was really like a
Mm,
science experiment for a couple years, and wasn't able to show up in the world the way I would like to. I had trouble with like balance and walking and talking and doing my job. And it, yeah, really changed everything of like, everything that I thought was a personality fell away. And having
mm,
to confront like what's left when you strip away all the things that you're good at, and the ways that frankly I've been like coping through life, and all the coping mechanisms we call ourselves.
mm,
And that led to like a really long period of like being really isolated and alone. At that point in time, like I didn't have a good track record as a friend. I was a pretty like arrogant, like defensive person. I'd had a hard childhood, and it was just like at war with the
mm,
world. Like I'm better off without you. I don't need you around. I don't want to be around people.
mm.
And yeah, so that was a very tough season. And I ended up at some point miraculously in a relationship during that period of time. And it wasn't the right partnership. And after a couple of years, we went our separate ways, and things got kind of messy with the separation. And especially financially, I pretty much left it all and was in a place of like, I really need to leave. Like, I can't stay in this situation. And frankly, didn't have money to pay rent or do about just anything else. And so my parents helped me buy a car, and I put everything I owned in that car, and I just started driving south. Um,
Wow.
yeah, there's obviously a lot more to the intervening years with like recovery and
Right.
all of that, but it was really, I hadn't really figured out who I was on the other side of that brain injury, and it made it really
Yeah.
hard to connect with people, to have friends, to have deep relationships,
Yeah.
um, and I really hadn't also figured out like how to make money with the new constraints I had. I wasn't able to do the job I'd previously been doing.
Mm.
The irony is not lost on me. I worked in physical rehabilitation for people who had been in car accidents. Like that was my job before.
Wow.
I know, like, and everything that I needed to heal me wasn't the skill set I had. And so it kind of sent me on this journey of like, oh, I am now one of the patients that slips through the cracks. And we always have those.
Mm.
And like as a practitioner, it is part of the journey of that to accept that you can't help everyone. And
Mm.
you can't think too much about those people you can't help because you got to focus on the ones you can. And
Right.
so like frankly, I didn't really think much about those people until I became one of them and was like, "Oh, I
Mm.
need totally different skills. I need different therapies and things that are available to me."
Mm.
And
Mm.
so throughout that time period, I started like researching and learning different things, and started
Mhm.
dabbling around in the realms of like somatics and psychedelics. And it was helping a little bit, but I really hadn't gained traction. And so, yeah, I
Mm.
found myself like ending this relationship with like no real community, no money, no plan. And yeah, threw everything in my car. And I lived in Canada at the time, and it was fall. And I was like, well, it's gonna get cold, so I guess I'll drive south. Like that was my plan. I somehow ended up all down the coast of like Oregon and Washington and into California.
Beautiful.
And yeah, yeah, and I had a history of like skills in woodworking, so I like built this little camper into my car, and I like tried to convince myself this is like a fun road trip. I'm choosing this adventure. I couldn't have afforded anything else, but I, talked myself into that for a bit. And
Mhm.
yeah, I ended up like living in LA, and it was really humbling because there were parts of it that were like fun road trip, like making pancakes on the beach as the sun comes up, and there were times where I was like, I'm cold in my car
Yeah.
and I don't have anywhere to go, and now this feels homeless.
Wow.
And like, or I'm at a gas station, like trying every card, and like, I got an $11,000 credit card maxed out. I've got a debit card that's overdrawn to the max. Like, just being like, fuck, what? Like, I have no plan. What do I do?
Wow.
And yeah, that was a pretty, those were pretty deep rock bottom moments.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
two questions here. One, what was happening for you? Like, what was the felt sense internally when you were getting the car and you're like, all right, you know what? I'm packing the car and I'm leaving. Like, what was that experience? Was it like excitement, a page turning, or what was the feeling there?
Yeah, I think in that particular moment as I was leaving, like I had stayed way too long in that
Okay.
relationship, you know, and I'd stayed too long, I had tolerated too much, and wasn't at a place where there could have been like resolution or resolve. Like that was no longer available. Like I had to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I had put myself in a position where everything was just like too triggering, and it was in part by that point of finally being able to make the choice. I think a part of me felt like empowered by that. But I also, yeah, felt super lost. You know,
Yeah.
being, I was leaving a relationship with a man that at the time I thought I was going to marry and like kind of had our whole future planned out. We had like a dog and a house and a business together. And like walking away from that was like, oh my God, I thought after my brain injury, I'd kind of put my life back together, and it
Yeah.
all felt like this like facade all over again. I was like, have I really not figured this out? Like, am I still just pretending my way through life?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it was what needed to happen, and kind of the
Yeah.
only option I saw. And
Yeah.
I'm glad I made that choice. But yeah, I was pretty like defeated and uncertain. There was a lot of crying in that car.
Yeah. Yeah. Like still in the dark, but somehow a sense that this was the right step.
Yeah, and you know that feeling of like there's more to lose before you'll be found. Of like
Mm.
I don't know where I'm going, and like it might not get better right away, but I think I need to go this way.
Yeah.
I've always really resonated with like the like underworld myths of
Yeah.
like we're gonna have to go like all the way in
Yeah.
to the bottom. Um, and I
Yeah.
also, I had just had a series of moments of like I've had my whole life stripped away from me, and so there is, even with all of that chaos, like there's always a part of me that's like I will figure it out.
Yeah.
Like it might get really hard and lonely, and like I'll figure it out. I've rebuilt from zero before. Like
Yeah.
I trust that, and I don't like idolize or pedestalize the like grief or trauma or loss, but I do trust
Hmm.
it. And
Yeah.
being able to be like, I'm not celebrating this. If someone tells me they're going through something really hard, I'm going to be sad with them. And
Yeah.
I also like, I trust it.
Yeah.
Like I trust like we're so resilient, and like, I have gotten through like impossible things that I would never wish on somebody else, but I also don't wish them
Hmm.
out of my life.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll continue on with your story. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, so LA was a really humbling chapter. I never intended to go to LA. I just like got connected with a few people, and I had one friend in LA, and bless him, he was like, "Hey, you want some work?" And I was like, "Definitely." And he was working in experiential marketing, which, if you're unfamiliar, is like when you go to like a sports game and there's like somebody from Amex outside to pester
Mm,
you. That's experiential marketing.
okay.
And this was during the, like when I was in LA, it was during the period of time that was the SAG-AFTRA strike, like all the actors were on strike. And so all of
Mm,
them were doing this. So it's like me and all of these like on strike actors working in experiential marketing. So we honestly had a really fun time. But it was the kind of work that, yeah, it took some humility for me to be like, no, this is what I need right now. Like, I don't have other options. I'm going to go do this job that otherwise, like, I would think is cringy. Um, and I like hustled at that work, and they didn't need to know that I was like rolling out of my car and showering in a 24-hour gym before. And because everybody else on site was kind of unreliable, because like if they got a gig or they had like like a rehearsal or something for an acting thing,
hmm.
they would just leave work. And so I was like suddenly the reliable one. And so within a few weeks, I was like managing the crews of people. And I was
Wow.
just down. I said yes to all the work. And that was how I slowly started to like make some money again. And yeah, that chapter in LA, like I got into like event production and just kind of made the right connections. LA's got a lot going on, and if you can shower and look presentable and show up on time, you can be hired there,
Okay.
like, you know, and it was really, as much as I was in a really hard season, it was also like I got to acknowledge how privileged I am too, you know, in so
Mm,
many different ways of like, if I needed to use a bathroom or something, it's like I'm living in a car, not a van, like a
hmm.
Subaru Forester, you know. I've done unspeakable things in the streets of LA, but it was also like I can just walk into a hotel and use their bathroom, like they're not going to
Yeah.
stop me, you know. And being around like the streets of LA is like a third world country, like there
Yeah.
is just like it is so heartbreaking what's happening there, and like seeing that and
Mm,
being in the midst of it was really scary in moments, and I
mm,
had scary and dangerous moments. Um, but yeah, it was really like, wow, I am so privileged that even in this situation, like I have a skill set and
hmm.
what people project onto me. You know, I learned the phrase pretty privileged there.
Yeah.
Like that I could get work, I could make connections, and I had a lot of opportunity. So I saved money from that and was like working all these events and yeah, continued to make the right connections. And so I was there like over a winter and then did what we all do when we really hit rock bottom after we've exhausted all of our opportunities. And I lived in my parents' basement for a few months after that. Um,
Nice.
and yeah, I went home for Christmas and extended it a bit, but eventually
Mm,
made my way back up to living in BC for a little bit in Canada. And that was where I started being like, okay, like let's put life back together and really looking at like, who do I want to be?
yeah.
And trying to not bring from the past like, oh well, this is who I've been and this is like who I'm supposed to be, these are the
Hmm.
expectations on me, but like assume that anything's possible. Like, all right, who do we want to be?
Hmm.
And that was where it started getting more interesting, and that, you know, led me towards, you know, following some of Eric Godsey's work. And at the time, like, couldn't afford anything he was doing. I guess like still didn't have much money,
Yeah.
but it was over that winter that I was at my parents' place for a few months, and Eric had put out this webinar, or he was talking about his like focus strategy and different things, and that was, you know, would have been what, about 3 years ago now, almost maybe. Um, and maybe 2.5. But and he started talking about these things, and I was like, oh, there's something here for me. And there was that like
Hmm.
spark that I hadn't felt in a long time. That I was like, oh, I'm actually interested in this. Like this is the first like non-survival thing I feel like I've done in a while.
Yeah.
And so I like he had given this webinar, and it was, you know, maybe 90 minutes long. I think it took me 6 hours to watch it because I wrote the whole thing down verbatim, you know,
Wow.
and I just obsessive notes, couldn't afford any of his programs, and was like, I'm going to execute on this. You
Yeah.
know, I know the industry well enough to know that like people give away everything for free, and if you're willing to execute, you don't have to pay for anything.
Yeah.
Execution is hard, so people pay each other. I pay plenty of
Hmm.
people for accountability and execution. But when
Yeah.
you're at rock bottom, if you want to, the information is there. If you can
Yeah.
like hold yourself to it. And so
Mm,
that was like, and I knew that. And so I was like, okay, like I am going to follow everything like to the letter of what this guy says. And it really started helping. And so when I had made my way back up to Canada, I joined his online community, the Dharma Artist Collective. Shout out,
hmm.
how we met.
Shout out to Dak.
And shout out the DAG, yeah. And and again, it was like those were like just like following those nudges of, you know, who do I want to be? Like, am I an artist? Am I a creative person? Like that was not on the table before.
Yeah.
I was like a scientist and very pragmatic, and
Uh-huh.
like in my head, I lived my whole life neck up. And just getting to be around these people, it was like, is this an option?
Hmm.
And yeah, so that kind of began the next chapter of getting into, you know, the like mentorship spaces with Eric and some of his work. And it really was this like full switch from, you know, not even that many months before, yeah, like living pretty rough in LA and like not
Mm,
having the resources or other things that I needed. So yeah, I'm really grateful that I got to go through that arc, and I also definitely don't wish it on anyone.
yeah. Totally. It's a really beautiful story. I appreciate you talking so much as well. I promise I'll talk more later in the episode, but right now we're focusing on the story because it's so good. So take us into when the truth telling initiation opened, and maybe you can kind of like open up that idea of the initiation. Specifically, I'm really curious, like if there was like an aha moment where you were like, "Oh my God, I'm literally living lies," or like a moment like that that
Mhm.
led to. starting it?
Yeah, so that moment actually came a lot earlier. Like we talked about before, like I think things really have to be like wrecking your life before you take big action. And
Yeah.
I think everyone likes to say like, oh, you could start whenever. Like, I don't necessarily think that's true.
Yeah.
Like, you got to get to a certain point before you have like the inner wherewithal.
Yeah.
But I had had a number of relationships in my earlier 20s where I started being aware of like specific moments where I had like done something or said something that either like overtly I knew wasn't true, or done something that I didn't want to like tell my partner about, or that there was like a
Mm,
section of my life I didn't want to reveal. And starting to
mm,
see like not only the like hurt and harm that I was able to cause other people, but
yeah.
also like it started just eating me. Just that
Mm,
like 10 out of 10 shame pit in your stomach of like that like I'm gonna throw up type feeling of like I've done something wrong, I'm a bad person, like I don't know how to get out of this.
yeah.
And that I'd had that experience a few times when I was younger, and got to a place where it was more like I don't want to feel that, and so I'm going to continue to like keep the world at bay, and so then at least like I haven't lied to someone, I haven't hurt somebody, and I don't have to feel this. Frankly, it was at that point more about I don't want to feel
Yeah.
this way. um, but it was really coming from an avoidant place, and it took a long time, and really hitting those rock bottoms of like almost dying, and then like really having my whole like material life fall apart, to be like, okay, maybe there's a different option. And
Yeah.
in so many ways, like it was not fully like a choice. Coming out of a brain injury, you don't get to not have help. Like, that doesn't work that way. You don't
Mm-hmm.
survive if you don't have help. And so it was really like I had to learn to receive. I had to come to a place where I was open to being more vulnerable with people and being honest about what I needed. I was no longer able to survive outside of that. And
Mm,
so I started like building my tolerance for that, like through necessity. And so that was really like the beginning of it. But I think that as I started to get older and have little flickers of moments where I saw, like, oh, this is what connection can feel like, oh, this is what's available, starting to have those moments of like, oh, I'm excited and interested in this thing, and wanting to be able to follow that more.
yeah.
And by then, I had started to have enough awareness of those pieces that I was working with coaches and other teachers around this piece of like, why is it so hard for me to reveal myself? Why? And, because I had kind of gotten out of the chapter of like overtly lying at that point, but it was more like exaggerating and withholding to look good, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
perception management, and a lot of like wanting to be impressive, wanting to have attention, and
Yeah.
never really like feeling like who I was just on my own, like that's not good enough,
Yeah.
and so I already kind of had that framing, and I was working on. I'd had a conversation with a friend, and we were talking about like, okay, so there's levels to this then, and like level one
Mm,
is don't lie. Like that's not the whole game. That's like the ground floor. That's like kindergarten level truth telling is don't lie. And I was
yeah.
like, I'm only just getting there. And so like,
Yeah.
okay, what's the rest of it? And so I had actually made this list. It wasn't an article, it wasn't something I was sharing. It was like just for me of like,
Mm-hmm.
what are the levels? And initially I think it was around like, okay, don't lie, and then don't exaggerate, don't withhold, tell people how you're really feeling, and just created these levels to it. And
Yeah.
that was then when I was just making a piece of art one day, and I had this string, and I'm very childlike with like wanting to collect things like rocks and strings. And so I was like, I like this string, I'm gonna keep this. And I tied it on
Yeah.
my wrist. And I had just been playing with that list of like levels of truth. And so it became this idea. I was like, oh, I'm gonna play this as a game. Like, what if I just tried this out? And I think at that point I had learned like you got to make things playful. You have to bring like curiosity where it just feels like more punishment. I'd had
Mm,
enough of that. And
mm-hmm.
so that kind of became the beginning of it, that I was like, I'm going to tie this string on my wrist, and for it'll maybe last a week or two. It's like a piece of thread. And until it breaks, I'm going to try and play this game as well as I can, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought it was going to be a couple weeks. Most resilient string on God's green earth. It lasted
Yeah.
for 10 months. And like in the best
Wow.
possible way, really like fucked up every area of my life.
Yeah.
And I had the hardest
Let's go.
conversations with everyone in my life, because I would have moments where, like, my mom would maybe, like, not unkindly, but be like, why are you like this? Like, well, here's why I think I'm like this, mom.
Yeah.
Or, a friend would ask me for feedback on something. And so there were like moments like that where it was like hard truths that maybe I wouldn't have said before. And there were also really beautiful moments of, a couple of years ago, there was one where it was like, oh, I'm aware that I'm like really into this person that I know. And it's like, all right, tell him.
Wow.
I'm being like, oh God,
Yeah, yeah.
like the truth is not always like confessing these bad things. It's also, and I think more importantly, get that stuff out of the way so you can do the other things that make you feel alive.
Yeah.
And so it
Beautiful.
led to all of these like just edges of like, oh my God, I can't say that. And then you do it and you're like, I'm a superhero. And
Yeah.
so that just was this game that I continued playing. And um, as you were saying, it ended up being almost this 2-year journey. Because when the string broke, I was like, oh no, this is like my
Yeah.
thing. This has improved
I
my
knew
whole
one.
life. And yeah, and so I had told one person, actually, or Aiden from the DAC, who you might know, I had told him, I was like, I think when this string breaks, I got to get it tattooed on. And it was the
Mm.
first ever retreat that we had had. All these artists came together in Lockhart, and it was just this like epitome moment of like, wow, my life is so different than like the like avoidance and pretending I was in a few years ago. And the retreat's just wrapping up. Everyone's like clapping end of the event. And as we're all clapping, it just like falls off my wrist. And of course, Aiden happens to be sitting right next to me, and he just looks at me as everyone's clapping. We just like lock eyes, and he goes, "You're getting a tattoo tomorrow."
Oh my
And
gosh.
it took me a little bit. I didn't get it right the next day, but I did get my red thread tattooed on my
Wow.
wrist. Um, and it became kind of it's taken on other meanings over the time as well. But now it's been almost 2 years since I made that initial commitment, and it has blossomed into so many other things now.
Yeah. Wow, there's so much here that I'm excited to get into. One thing that I think about hearing you speak to this, and actually since our conversation when we just got to see each other in person, when you were starting to talk about some of this, is like, if I'm being honest with myself, I still am needing to graduate from level one. And
We all are. We don't graduate. We don't
oh, we
graduate.
don't graduate. You just
We don't
see you
graduate.
see deeper layers. Well, one thing
Yeah.
that I noticed that I do is like, um, if I'm in a conversation and the conversation's flowing, and then they say, "Oh, have you seen that movie or something?" Like, not all the time, but depending on who I'm around, sometimes I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I've seen the movie," and I think on a subtle layer, I like write it off as just keeping the conversation flowing. It
Mm,
just it doesn't matter, but there
yeah.
probably is. I mean, there definitely is like a deeper layer. I think of not wanting that to be like a little poke in my my identity. Like, what, you haven't seen that? It's like, no, of course
Mhm.
I've seen that. So just little examples like that. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is I think there's a lot of people who would hear this idea that like I was lying to myself and be like, "What do you mean you're lying to yourself?" Like, I don't lie to myself. But
Mhm.
then there's like these subtle, like these moments where you're like, "Oh my God, I'm totally lying to myself." Because as you say, we all do it.
We all do it.
Um, and I just think it's like a really profound moment to have with yourself to admit that I lie. Like, I lie in my life. Um, So something that I'm really curious about is like the progression throughout this initiation for you,
Mhm.
because as you said in one of the articles that I read this morning, is like start small, which I think is a really important idea of like start small, like seeing it as a muscle that you're building. And
Mhm.
so the intention is more of like reps versus trying to do it in a day. Actually, this is a good moment. I want to read a quote that you said. Quote, "No one changes their life. They change their day, and that changes their life." I love this quote. And
Mm.
it really, to me, like speaks to this idea of momentum, which I've been thinking a lot about. Like, in some ways, life just feels like momentum. It's either like upward momentum or downward momentum. But what we do in the day to day, in the moment by moment, we're feeding momentum one way or the other. And so, like, what you're saying here is every day is just an opportunity to feed momentum in your life in a good way. And the
Mhm.
frame that you kind of held for that was, I'm telling the truth. That's the momentum that I'm feeding, which leads to so many different things. But Yeah, I would love for you to take us through like kind of the different arcs of that journey for you. Because I can imagine that you get to these like threshold moments where you've gotten to a certain point of like telling you the truth, and then it's almost as if a new horizon of your life has opened up.
Absolutely.
And there's like different
Yeah.
levels. So take us through the journey.
Yeah, and before I do, I think it's important too, because I think inherently, anyone talking about this topic, it'll bring up shame, because that's why we lie. Like that's a really good barometer for it. Is like you'll know where you feel shame because it's where we lie,
Yeah.
and the one of the biggest things that I find with going into this work, and it's just like for myself first, was like, this is not about being good. This is not about integrity. This is not about perfection. This is not about confess your sins and be perfect and honest all the time.
Yeah.
It's kind of the opposite almost. It's like, what if it's actually okay that this is what's true for you? You
Mm.
know, what if it's like, rather than like, oh, you're bad for being dishonest, it's like, oh, like this is like an internal violence to you that you're not okay with the fact that this is what's true for you. And
Yeah.
like once we let people in on what's true for us, we start, you know, puncturing all the stories that we're not lovable for who we are. And we all have that story.
Mm.
And so that framing I think is so important, because otherwise this feels like using integrity as another like cage and whip. And the whole self-help, self-optimization, which I have a lot of frustration with, like that side of the industry.
Yeah.
And so that's like an important framing for me in this, that this is not another thing to try and be perfect with. But
Yeah.
like I'm curious about what would happen when I start becoming a detective for all the little moments in my life where I do those things. And
Yeah.
so the arc for me was really, and I think this is where everyone starts, is like trying to have, like starting at the end and trying to have these big dramatic grand actions. I'm going to flip my life over. I'm going to be a different person tomorrow, and trying to answer these like impossibly big questions, like my purpose and who I am and what I want in my relationships and how I'm going to
Mm.
serve the world. And it's like, you
Yeah.
can't even correct the barista when they get your coffee order wrong. Like, if that's still spicy for you, like good luck tuning into your own infinite intelligence and intuition to guide your life. Like, I'm sorry, you have some like lighter dumbbells to
Uh,
lift right now.
yeah.
And that's, you know, me to me, right? I couldn't
Yeah.
tell my then partner if I disagreed on like where we were going to eat, right? Or like how we were spending our time or the way I was spoken to. You know, that if and until those little moments are available, you know, that's we don't have the capacity. So for me, I got really humbled and started noticing those little moments. And I think what I like about this, it's like kind of beautiful and hard, is once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started making these like smaller moments for myself. Like one of the easy ones to catch early on is obviously like overt lying, level one. But then like, where are all the ways I subtly inflate things? And it's
Mm.
easiest to catch them when they're like overtly like black and white. So using absolutes like always, never, everybody, no one, right? Those are an exaggeration by definition, is life is not that consistent and people are
Yeah.
not that consistent. And so noticing when I use absolutes, noticing when I'm like numerically imprecise, like I just did something for 2 hours, like why when you asked me about it did I say 3? You know,
Mm.
and just noticing like you said, easy to blow off those moments, not a big deal, whatever, does it really matter? Like, well, it's you subtly telling yourself all day long that like what's true for you and what's real for you is not good enough, and that
Yeah.
it would actually be dangerous for other people to know that. And when we continue to have that little like self-abandonment all day long on the small things, like it just reinforces the story and the bigger questions and the bigger moments that we're trying to lean into, like it's so out of range. And so I started having that of like correcting myself in the moment of like, oh yeah, like meditated for half an hour. Totally did like 9 minutes. Actually, it was 9 minutes. I don't know why I said that. You know, like, and everybody nods, everybody laughs. Like we're all in it together. Everyone's doing the same bullshit, and being able to look at that and be like, oh, okay, like I didn't die. Actually, it might have even created some connection. And also
Mm-hmm.
that there's plenty of moments where, yeah, the truth also meant that like somebody was upset,
Yeah.
and or that somebody that I really cared about was like thought of me differently. Right? That's really good data. It means their perception of me is formed on the lies I've been telling. And if the
Mm-hmm.
little things throw them off, like well, I got another thing coming when we get to the big stuff. And
Yeah.
so that was kind of the beginning, was like the small truths. Like, oh
Mm.
no, I actually never heard of that idea that's relevant to my field, apparently. Like being able to express that, being able to, with a client or with a patient, like telling them, like, yeah, actually, like, I haven't heard of that condition, or I don't know what that medication is, starting to like little honesties there. And just revealing bits of myself more and more and noticing, like, okay, I didn't die. There's moments where it's spicy, where it's uncomfortable, but I can be honest about those things. Like, it's safe to. And oh my God, the mental energy and bandwidth you get back when you are not constantly performing and like pinging off of the room.
Mm.
Because when there's constantly, for me, this energy of like, I've been asked a question and the answer is not about what's true or inside. It's like, well, what's going to look good and who's in the room and how do I feel about this and how revealed can I be?
Yeah.
Right. And there's, still a place for discernment and context. But when it's just like, oh, well, what's true? And like just that, like, can I just speak from there, was totally
Mm.
different. Like I felt
Yeah.
like it was so much less exhausting socially, and it came with a lot of having to like get right with people who also just like weren't down, and
Yeah.
how often I performed to create like closeness and to create like social cohesion. And having
Hmm.
way more moments where somebody would say something and they'd like look at me and be like, right? And I'd be like, yeah, no, I totally disagree. I actually think that's like really unkind. Like, let me tell you, the room shifts quickly. And being able to have those moments and like hold that. Like, well, that's what's true for me. Like, can I handle that? And so it
Yeah.
started to be, as it went from like just cleaning up my side of the street and to actually like asserting myself of like, I would prefer this. Oh, actually, I disagree with that. Or like, I don't think that's fair or right. And so it went from just this like internal thing to starting to become more relational and being able to assert when at least like a boundary was crossed. And then
Yeah.
eventually getting to the place where it's like, oh, I can actually like make requests to get my needs met. I had
Hmm.
no idea everybody wants to give you what you want. You just have to let them know what that is.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, it's so vulnerable to tell people the things you actually want. Like, hey, I'm
Hmm.
actually feeling like really wobbly. Could I have a hug and some verbal reassurance? Like that I'm
Yeah.
good and you're not mad and like we're not on thin ice. Like, that's so vulnerable to say. And I've never had someone say no,
Yeah.
you know? And like, it's only ever brought me closer in the situations where I'm able to do that, right? And created more truth. It doesn't always mean it was comfortable, but starting to get to that place of being able to actually like ask for what I want and receive it was like, oh my God, that was never available to me before. That was not like within the realm of possibility in my like, younger life and especially relationships. And
Yeah.
so that was where it really started shifting, was like, oh wow, like being okay with what's true for me, and not from a sense of like not feeling those things, and like the opposite of actually just like, oh hey, these are the needs I have, these are the insecurities I have, and like that's there, and that being okay, not needing to erase those things, and
Yeah.
finding that that was actually what created so much more intimacy. Like I always felt like I had to like get rid of those things or heal those things, and it's just like the willingness to like have the courage to be seen in that was what created
Yeah.
so much more connection.
Mm. There's so much here that I want to touch on, and just thank you first of all. Like I can, it's so nourishing to feel you talk about this because I can. It's just so in you, like you're living it, and it's refreshing. I think a lot of people can resonate with the experience of like being in a space where there's someone who I guess is like you in the sense that like you can tell they speak up for what they want. They speak their truth. They're not afraid of, stepping on people's toes and people pleasing and things like this. There's like such a deep sense of agency, and also like I can trust in you. Like I can actually lean into the space with you knowing that you're not putting on any sort of facade or anything like this. Like there's a deep sense of trust. Um, and I just know for myself when I'm in spaces with people like that, it's so obvious to me. Like it's so felt. And I
It is
think,
such a felt sense, right? And,
yeah.
and and like that's one of the things I found was like all the things that we're like terrified are going to create rupture, which like
Hmm.
So yeah, like they will with the wrong people, you know.
Yeah.
But also like that's what creates safety is the willingness to set the boundary. And for me it was always like, well, I don't want to upset this person. I want to keep this person close. And so I
Yeah.
wouldn't speak my needs. And it was what created distance because it's like there's a lack of safety. And I
Yeah.
always think of they did this study once on school kids and like
Mm.
you know how playgrounds have fences around them?
Yes.
You know, like for obvious reasons.
Uh-huh.
But they did this study with kids and they gave them a playground with no fence and they all play in the middle, like kind of together. But if you give them a fence, they'll all go out and like explore to the edges because it's safe to.
Wow.
And we're the same way, you know, psychologically and physically, that when there's some containment, we know we can go up to the edges and we're actually curious too, right? And I really find that with other people, like, you know, if I don't trust that someone else could look me in the eye and be like, hey, that's disrespectful, like don't do that again.
Mm-hmm.
That to me, A, like in a man, that's like absolutely like startling and then a turn on. That I'm like, mm-hmm, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You know, like, but
Yeah.
also it's like, oh my God, I just like my whole body relaxes around that person. Because I
Yeah.
know they'll tell me what's up, you know,
Yeah.
and being able to know that like someone will tell you when they're bothered by something or tell you when they're upset by something or that like express their needs. Because now I can just be myself.
Yeah.
Right? I've got a big personality. Sometimes I got a lot of things to say. And I love being around people where I can be that. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that if I step on somebody's toes or something gets like lands the wrong way or doesn't feel good, they'll tell me. And I
Yeah.
don't need that from everyone because that's not realistic, but from the people that are close to me, you
Yeah.
know? And like some of my closest friends, the relationship started because we were like in some sort of interaction and I said something and there was this one guy and he looked at me and immediately went, no, bit talk downy. And I was like, I like you. And now we're friends
Wow.
because he called me out on that. And I was like, you're
Yeah.
right. I can see why you took it that way. Like wasn't my intent, but being able to like not defend myself and be like, yeah, totally. And then we just continued. Right, being able to stay in it, that there isn't this shame spiral for me. I can tolerate someone like setting a line with me. And that was
Mm-hmm.
also something before that would lead to like collapse, was like
Yeah.
receiving a boundary. And that, as you know, it kind of goes from this arc of like the internal, like, can I get right with my own reality? Then can I actually start like putting that out into the world and like expressing my needs and desires and standing up for myself. And as it becomes more relational, I found it kind of came back to this internal place of like, once all of that is available and we've cleared a lot of the noise of
Yeah.
just the constant, like, are they okay? Is the world accepting of me? Am I doing all right?
Mm-hmm.
There's this whole other channel. And that's where I think like the creativity comes online. And that's, I think, some of the ways we have to get out of our own way to get into like artist mode and to really be in that receptive place. Because it's like once I
Yeah.
clear all of the garbage of like my
Yeah.
concerns about what I look and what people think and all of this, it was like, oh wow, like discernment comes so much easier. When I've
Mm.
been practicing like that quick yes, quick no on like what's true for me on the small things,
Yeah.
then when it comes to like, oh, do I want to pursue deeper connection with this person? Ooh, am I
Mm-hmm.
excited by this idea to write about? You know, do
Yeah.
I want to collaborate on a project with this person? Like, you hone the discernment with small things, and then you can actually hear the whisper on bigger things. And
Mm-hmm.
that was where it started for me being like, oh, wow, like I have interests.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever really knew what they were before. I was so concerned with
Wow.
what people thought of me that
Yeah.
it was like all a performance. And that
Yeah.
then if someone asked me what I was interested in, like back then my answer would have just been like, well, what's going to look good to this person? It was like a it was this like reading and this like formula versus like what's just true? Like what am I interested in? And back then I wasn't pursuing any of those things, so I had
Yeah.
no idea. And I think that's how most people feel is they don't actually know what they want or what they find interesting. And I
Mm.
think that's like the pre-work.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to get to that point of now, like, you know, I'm learning instruments and I'm writing poetry and I'm teaching this course and like having this like really like beautifully full life in so many ways that I think comes from being willing to humble myself and go through the cleanup of
Yeah.
all of like the garbage and the static and the noise in that signal.
Yeah. This is so good. Two things. One that you're already touching on, but it made me think about a section from Gati's book, The Art of Dharma, that I was reading yesterday or 2 days ago. He's talking about the daimon, which, people who are unfamiliar with that, you can think about as like your inner compass. And he was talking about how when you lie, you're sending mixed signals to basically your inner compass. It's like you're confusing it, and which is
Hmm.
what you're talking about. And like as you start to tell yourself the truth and advocate for yourself in your life, you're literally like cleaning the space, clearing the space so the signals are clear. And then
Hmm.
how like peeling the layers of the onion, eventually you're like, oh my gosh, I like to write poetry and my interest, and just like starting to take out the trash. So I think that's really really interesting to think about how it's like sending mixed signals. The other thing that I just want to double click on that I think is so incredibly important that you're speaking to is how most people want to start off with like trying to find what their purpose is, or like these big things. And
Hmm.
I see this a lot with people in my close environment where they're like stuck in a paralysis because they're asking these huge questions and they don't know. And then it's just like this chronic, I don't know what my purpose is, and I'm not going to start taking out the trash until I figure out what my purpose is, because that's the motivation that's going to get me to do those other
Yeah.
things. And like I get that. And I just think there's such a code here with just starting small, like starting with these reps and starting to just, because I think for all humans, but humans who are asking those big questions and not getting the answers they want, if you looked down immediately into your immediate life now, you would see a to-do list of things that you're supposed to be doing that you're not doing. You would
Hmm.
see trash that's at your feet right now. And so just like, taking a note from someone like Zoe and saying that like that's where it starts, like trusting in the compounding interest, I guess, of doing those things over
Hmm.
time, and how eventually they do lead to these bigger things.
For sure. And I think it's so natural and human to want to know where we're walking to, and I had somebody say to me once, like, know which direction the mountaintop is, but if you keep
Yeah.
looking at it while you're walking, like you're gonna fall on your face.
Yeah.
And I think being able to find the threads of what feels like a direction for now,
Yeah.
because it's hard for me even like to show up when I'm like, well, where am I headed? What am I doing?
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, when that is unclear, what I've found is like you probably need silence, stillness, and deep nourishment. Because when you
Mm.
give yourself those things, you'll know. You'll know at least what direction you want to start in. And if you really don't know, that is the starting point. Is like silence, stillness, deep nourishment. Because when you are
Yeah.
well taken care of and rested and like settled, and you
Mm-hmm.
clean up what gets in the way of you doing that, it arrives. But
Yeah.
we don't want that to be the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the pieces that I'm running this course that is taking people through this initiation that I took myself through. And one of the pieces we start with on day one is I give people very simple instructions, and then I stop talking and I'm like, yeah, no, that's it. And like, notice the parts of you that want it to be more complicated. Notice the parts of you that have always wanted the fanfare, that want to hide behind complexity, because then when you fail, it's because it was complicated and hard and you didn't get it, not
Yeah.
because you didn't show up.
Yeah.
And being able to like, can you make it simple enough that you can execute? And if it doesn't happen, it's not because you didn't get it, it's because you didn't do it. And like
Yeah.
making it about action as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
like ideas and theory. And like you kind of open this speaking about that like intellect capacity gap.
Yeah.
We are so into learning about things right now. And like,
Mm.
God bless all the people using ChatGPT to explain their therapeutic things to them.
Every single problem in their life.
Yeah, and like all of us do it. It's not a
Yeah.
problem
Yeah.
to use that to expand our understanding or to look at our own patterns. And it is actively going to keep you away from taking action on the thing.
Mm.
Right? And being able to start looking at the ways that we would so much rather learn about the thing than do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's this like famous New York Times comic, and it's a guy facing two doors, and it says heaven and books about heaven. And like we all know which one we're choosing.
Yeah.
Like go do the thing.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable, and it means being a beginner and being wobbly and feeling awkward and cringy. And we would all rather read a book and feel like we understand ourselves more deeply. and like take a quiz about our love language, then practice expressing to our partner that we need verbal reassurance.
Yeah.
And it's tough. We don't want to do that. It's uncomfortable. And,
Yeah.
we have to start so much smaller than we want to.
Yeah. Yeah, this was reminding me of something that God's people talk about whenever like someone's facing a problem. There's usually like two doors we can go through. There's like the, spiritual parts work, basically heal the part of you that's the reason why the thing is not happening in your life until you finally heal that part of you, and then the behavior will naturally arise. Versus just what's the behavior that you want to do, or what's the behavior that, you
Yeah.
would do if you were healed. And I think they work in tandem beautifully. But I feel like that's really what you're advocating here for, is like just doing the behavior, getting the rep in, bringing all those parts of you along the ride with you, holding them gently, but like doing the behavior.
Hmm.
And I think there's such a need for more of that, especially like within like the spiritual community.
Yeah, I think because like, and I'll speak just from my own experience and the people I'm around in what I would call spiritual communities, there is such a I want to seem enlightened energy about it.
Yeah.
And so we'd rather talk about it and be really informed about our patterns or our problems or our projections or our triggers and our traumas than actually be seen in the messy work of like navigating that and
Yeah.
admitting that that's not going anywhere. We just like get right with it and we get okay
Hmm.
with it and we allow other people to be human and like we learn how to love the like mundane or triggered versions of each other. And that's often like not what I'm seeing in those sort of
Hmm.
spaces is like the people like is an unwillingness to accept that like, this doesn't mean like transcending our humanity. It means
Yeah.
like accepting it and living with that and like being able to hold each other gracefully in that and
Yeah.
not bypassing like the well you're just projecting or like you're clearly triggered. It's like, well, can you love that person in that? Can we hold each other in that? Can we understand that that's not going anywhere?
Yeah.
um, and I think that's often why I've been like felt removed from some of those spaces,
Yeah.
spaces that like profess to be spiritual, but it's that sort of like good vibes only. Let's talk in breathy voices. Like it's all love and light. I'm like, I don't know what your life looks like, but mine ain't all love and light. So I guess I'm not welcome here, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And when I start speaking about those things, it resonates with people. And I think
Hmm.
that's really like one of the things that I have, it's been a blessing to accept in myself is like all of the things that I thought were reasons that I was like fundamentally broken and wrong
Hmm.
are actually the things that qualify me to do the work I'm doing now. Is that the
Mm.
all of those mistakes I made, and going through those and moving through those and knowing what that pit in my stomach feels like and knowing what, it feels like to pace a room when you are like in the anxious spiral of needing reassurance from somebody who can't give it to you, like
Hmm.
because I know those feelings, I am now equipped to help people. And
Yeah.
there's things that like you can't take anyone anywhere you haven't been.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean you have to have the exact same path as them, but I think this willingness to be forthcoming about our struggles is what
Yeah.
allows us to help other people. Not to pretend we don't have them, not to pretend like we've fixed it all and we don't feel those things.
Hmm.
And it's been really healing for me too to be able to share the ways that I'm still in so much of that.
Yeah.
Like I said to you, like we don't graduate.
Yeah.
I have like transgressions on every level of that truth thing, probably on the daily, but
Yeah.
being able to like expand our options, and that to me is always like that's the best definition of healing in any arena for me is like having more options.
Yeah.
Whether it's like biomechanically, do you have more range of motion, or from like an emotional standpoint, like do you have different ways you could respond to this situation? And
Yeah.
sometimes we're going to lean on old strategies, and that's fine. But being able to walk up to those
Hmm.
edges enough that we create more space.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to read a quote from you. This is from one of your poems about the Wolf of Truth. I don't know if that's the
Okay.
name. Is that the name?
A wolf named Truth. Yeah.
A Wolf Named Truth. So, so beautiful, epic. It's on her podcast. Everyone should go listen to it. Okay. Quote. I will not spend a lifetime dissecting myself into pre-portioned pieces for the digestibility of those who cannot look me in the eye.
Mm.
And like in this conversation, I'm really feeling that like the frame of telling the truth and doing these quests and closing the distance between information and capacity or knowledge and capacity. Like it really is the journey of expressing the blueprint of who you are.
Hmm.
I feel that way.
Yeah.
And because it's really a journey of being more seen. It's like all of those lies in a way, um, on some level, it's just about exposing yourself. That this is just me. This is me, and the willingness to unapologetically be that. Um, I think part of why the conversation felt super timely is because in the David call last night with Godzi, the book, like No More Mr. Nice Guy got brought up, but generally we
Mm.
were just talking about that idea. And there was a lot of guys in the chat and whatnot who are like, oh my gosh, I need to do this more, yada, yada, yada. And I feel that that's also like so clearly what you're speaking to, and this willingness to, again, be you, be yourself,
Hmm.
expose yourself, be seen in new ways. And there's going to, and I think the greatest tests of being seen is when like the risk to be seen maybe sends turbulence into your environment, the people in your environment, or whatever it is. It requires that kind of moment. So what I just wanted to drop in here, and then I would love to like get into more of like some of the next levels for you within this journey, kind of
Hmm.
the different octaves of the truth telling initiation, um, is this idea of like abandoning yourself. And again, there's no shame here, but I think that this is a really helpful frame to use when you're thinking about these little moments of lying or these little moments of fabricating the truth. Um, is it like it does feel like a subtle abandoning of myself, of
Hmm.
like my experience isn't worthwhile advocating or it's not safe, and so it's easier to abandon myself or not. So kind of just this tension between advocating for yourself versus abandoning yourself. I really love that frame. So if there's anything you want to say about that, please do. And then
Mm.
let's get back into the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a funny balance because even as I hear you say, and like, there's no shame here, and it's like, well, by definition, there definitely is for all of us, you know, and I totally get it too because it's like in those spaces, it's like I'm trying not to add any more to the shame gremlins and like
Yeah, yeah,
feeding them, um, but it's like, but we all do have that shame of
yeah.
like I'm on the outside of something that everybody else is on the inside of, and we all feel like that you can hear somebody else be like, be yourself. And you're like, oh no. Secretly, you don't know that I'm fucked up in specifically unique ways more than anybody
Mm-hmm.
else. That if people only knew what's true for me, I would never be
Mm-hmm.
lovable.
Mm-hmm.
And the irony is, we all think that about ourselves.
Yeah.
And and I think that the what I have found personally the scariest part of that pivot from like the being in a very self-abandoning place to being in a place where we are like standing up for ourselves and advocating for ourselves, that is not a light switch at all.
Yeah.
And there is a void space in the middle where you're not self-abandoning, but you have no idea what to advocate for because you don't know what you want. And that is
Mm.
what I think people don't talk about. It's like, oh, well, stand up for yourself, advocate for your wants and your needs. I don't know what they are because I've
Yeah.
been ignoring them. And that's the terrifying place, is that's a really scary thing to express. Is
Mm-hmm.
like, this doesn't work for me and I don't want this, but I don't know what would. And it is
Mm-hmm.
having to dance in that wasteland of being in that place of like, oh, I am like shedding the old thing and things are falling away and I don't know what's coming. And I'm not yet in a place where I'm seeing preferences come in or that I'm having desires or interests, but everything's falling away. And that is like
Yeah.
a particular scary moment that I have been in, that I have like held a number of people through now, is that piece of, yeah, like we don't just switch to a place where we are like advocating for ourselves.
Mm.
There is such a middle ground that can feel so wobbly and scary and isolating, where we don't yet know what we want to pursue or who we want to connect with or how we want to connect. And until we're willing to go there, we haven't cleared enough space to let things come in. You know, and there's this phrase of like nature abhors a vacuum, you know, like if you create some space, like something will come into it. And that's a really, really hard thing to trust. And the metaphor that I've used before, because we all know this one of like, you know, when you're sitting in a restaurant and you like order your food and you get caught up in conversation, and suddenly when it's coming you realize there's a bunch of stuff on the table that's like needs to not be there for the food to land, and so everyone does that little rearrangement of all the things on the table as the food comes into sight. Like, that's really easy to do, and everyone's on board to do it together once the food is there. And it's this big act of faith to clear the table long before the food is coming. And that's kind of what we have to do in our lives, is like, I don't know what's going to land on this table yet, but I'm going to make space as if something really good is coming.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm going to clear off everything that is in the way so that something can arrive. And it's hard to do that when it's like the waiter isn't within sight, you know, and it's a big act of faith to do that, and then to like be able to hold that while, you know, in the in-between and in that like limbo space. And
Yeah.
I think that is really the piece of like self-abandonment that I think doesn't really get spoken about, is that there's the middle.
Yeah, the valley of not knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that too. Like, you know, I guess we're talking about like speaking your needs in a relationship or something like this, but I can also feel you speak into it in a way that it kind of is like it extends out to so many other arenas, even like, you know, realizing that you've spent the first 18 years of your life completely disconnected from who you are, living someone else's life, and just like that moment of that's not it, but I have no idea what is.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So something that I love that you spoke to is like on this journey of truth telling, maybe it starts with being honest about you haven't seen the movie, but then at some points it turns into like you being an artist, or you doing the MF game. So I'd love for you to speak to like some of these maybe later stages and openings that happened throughout this initiation, like the MF game, or like, you know, maybe your work kind of blossoming in a new way.
Yeah, yeah. I think it probably goes hand in hand with like the systems thinking and the part of me that is very like creatively, I can be a very chaotic person. And there's also a part of me that enjoys order. You know, I'm sitting here in front of my color-coded books, you know, and like
I
there's a
love
part
it,
of
by
me
the way.
that like brings me joy, of things to be ordered and organized, and like in some other parallel universe, I'm just like a professional organizer. Like I would love that as a job. And so I think there's always a part of me that really likes having a system and a plan, because again, it's that fence around the playground. It's like containment, so that I can then go be in like chaos things. But as long as I know I've kind of checked these boxes or I'm hitting these marks, like we're good. And so it's often like the containment and the structure that gives me the freedom to explore new things, or to try something else, or to allow myself to like be free. And so it was, you know, I was living in Canada. I had kind of, I'd started this truth experiment, and I was in Eric's space, and he has the Dharma Artist Collective, which at the time I joined it was like $50 a month, and that's still what I pay for it. And
Same.
but he had, yeah, getting in under the wire. I think I joined it the day he raised the price, because, you know, psychology. But I was not in a place to afford actually doing his mentally fit program. You know, I think it was like $3,000 or something. And it was, I'd already had my truth experiment going. I was playing that game. And a piece of that for me was like orient towards what you find interesting, and then like back that with your actions. And like that's a form of truth telling to me. And so Eric published this thing. He was like, hey, if you really are serious about wanting to learn this stuff and can't afford the program, here's what you do. And it was like he was gifting me that original webinar all over again, of like, hey, here's the map. And
Yeah.
I'm down, I'll follow it if like I have enough breadcrumbs. And that was what he provided. So he mapped out this thing. He was like, hey, these are all the books I read in the last 16 years that allowed me to create this mentally fit program. And it was like, I don't even know how many books and like a bunch of like 100 hours of podcasts and articles and all these things. And he was like, it started on October 1st. He was like, you have a year to finish it. So this was October of, I guess, 2024 then.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a year to finish it, which was like, you'd probably have to like head down focus on it for a year. And at the time, like, again, didn't really have work structure, didn't really know what I was doing, was kind of barely making ends meet, wasn't living in the car, but wasn't doing much better either. And something about that, I was like, this is the thing. This is what I have to do. Like, I need structure. I need something to be doing. And I had always previously had a story that I'm naturally gifted at things, but I'm not actually very good at learning things. It was like a previous
Yeah.
story I held. Like I like crushed it in school really young, but like was that annoying kid that like never studied but aced the test.
Mm.
And was just did that super well. Got to university and was like, oh my God, what? Like not prepared. Of actually having to learn things that just didn't come naturally. There was like a depth and I needed to really sit with them. And I
Mm.
still did decently well in university, but not at all to like, oh, I'll just get 100 on every test without trying. Like, no, there were things I almost failed and things that I didn't do well in. And so I had this story going in of like that it's really hard for me to learn things and that I think there's a part of me that also thought like maybe I'm just lazy. Like am I just like it's hard for me to push through things and like I just stop showing up and like I'm secretly gifted at some things, but also like if I'm not already, I'll never get better. It's like I
Yeah.
kind of had that story. And so going into this process was also a bit of like wanting to disprove that. And so he had all these books and things, and I like laid it all out. Like, okay, I'm going to go in this order. These are all the things. I'm going to just go down this list, and I knew I needed some like form of structure and containment for that.
Yeah.
And so I started making these little check boxes on pieces of paper. Actually, I think I might have one of them right here behind me. I'll see if I can
They're
just like
epic.
grab one. Yeah, I think they're right
I
here. One sec.
copied yours.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Also,
Uh,
can you explain what the MF game actually entailed?
oh yeah, so that was I'm not gonna be able to find those right now, but there. So the whole game of it was like if you read all of those books that were on his list and do all the podcasts, all the articles, if you
Mm-hmm.
read all of them, he will gift you Mentally Fit for free like that time next year. And
Yeah.
I was like, dope, I'm gonna do this. Caveat, you have to post online every day for as long as it takes you to finish it. And
Yeah.
not just like, here's a picture of the book I'm reading, like put your thoughts, like
Yeah.
integrate it into your knowledge system.
Mm.
And so that was the aim. And so that I created these little trackers. They're super simple. It's on a piece of graph paper. And I made like, I think it was like made 3 or 4 things that I started with and a set amount of time that I would do them. So I said, okay, I'm going to study for 90 minutes every day. And I'm going to read the next book. And I'm going to do that. And I'm going to post something about it. And I think I had maybe like movement or something else on there. I don't remember what the initial list was. But the big ones for me was doing the 90 minutes of studying and posting. And my deal with myself was like, okay, I'm gonna track this honestly that, I don't get to color in the full square if I didn't study for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
If I studied for 80, like that's not 90. And so I
Yeah.
had a system that was like very clear, like, okay, like I would shade it in partially if I like started but didn't finish the time, but I got to fully color in the square if I finished the whole thing. So I had
Mm-hmm.
these 4 behaviors that I was tracking every day. And I finished the MF games. It took me 7 months. I thought it was going to take longer, but it took me 7 months. And I think quite a few people started. Eric has like a massive following, so I think there like a lot of people started this. And I was just like chugging along with it over that period of time. Like I moved to Mexico. I was like, lots of chaos was going on in my personal life.
Wow.
Yeah, I was living in Mexico when I finished it. And, I had assumed I had to like wait the year and I just DM'd Eric because I knew the round of Mentally Fit was starting. And I didn't know him at the time. Like I was in the DAC and so I was in his space, but we weren't like friends yet. But when I started posting all these things, he followed me and like every day he was watching my stories of like the things I was posting and he was super sweet and encouraging. And so he and I bonded through that. And so when I finished it, he was like, dude, no way. No one's finished. And I was like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, you're the only person who's done it. And I was like, holy shit. And that was like a big moment of not necessarily like ego, but almost like a, oh wow, like all those stories I had about myself about like
Yeah.
being lazy or not being a good
Yeah.
student or not actually being capable of like pushing through things when like I'm not naturally good at them. I was like,
Yeah.
oh wow, like maybe those things aren't true. Maybe I
Yeah.
needed to like be brave enough to give myself some evidence for that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that was like still like really powerful in that is like doing all this tracking. You know, I had days for sure where I would check all 4 boxes and I'd color them all in. And each week I made a new piece of graph paper. So it had like 1 week was each block. Right? So it was like a 7x4 thing. And I would color in the things for each day. I never had a perfect week in 7 months. I
Wow.
never had 1 week where I got them all.
Wow.
And it didn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, I posted, I kept the posting consistency to the standard that he said it had to be. I think you had to like, it had to be like at least 80% of the days you shared
Mm-hmm.
something. You know, it couldn't just be like
Yeah.
sporadic throughout. It had to be consistent,
Yeah.
which he did for a number of reasons. You know, it really got me over my own like stories
Yeah.
about putting my thoughts on the internet.
Yeah.
And in finishing that, it was like, oh wow, like I just achieved this thing I'm really proud of. I learned so much. It like created so many opportunities for me and connections. And now like I'm really central in this community. Like, whoa. I
Yeah.
didn't get it perfect. I was like literally me being publicly trying and failing and grappling with new ideas. And like, it disproved all these stories I'd had about what it takes to learn, to connect, to like be seen as valuable.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was this like really beautiful thing. And I ended up being the TA for the next like 4 rounds of Mentally Fit through that course and, you know, getting to know Eric well and moving to Austin during that season. So it was
Yeah.
really like this whole whirlwind that started with me making those commitments to myself, but that they were small.
Yeah.
90 minutes, I'm going to read a book every day and like put something on my story about it, you know, and I'm going
Yeah.
to like try and tell the truth throughout it.
Yeah. So epic. Again, it's the quote like you don't change your life in a day, you know.
You change your day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you change your day.
And that's the thing, like we all want the fireworks. You know, our
Yeah.
ego wants the fireworks of like today looks dramatically different than yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, and whereas you know, for me it's easier to like quit my job or move across the country or break up with somebody than it is to look in the mirror and be like, what actually needs to change here?
Yeah.
And then incrementally, slowly taking that action. You
Yeah.
know, all the things that like we wish we could be good at or skilled at. If you watched a 10-minute YouTube video and then practiced for 10 minutes a day for the next 2 months, you'd be better than 90% of the people on the planet.
Yeah.
You just don't. You watch 3 hours of video one day and then never do it again. And it's
Totally.
wild 'cause it's so annoying how well
Yeah.
that works. It's so annoying. Like, fuck, really? I just consistently
Yeah.
do the thing in small doses and like let time pass?
Yeah.
Like,
Ah,
that's so aggravating.
so
But it
good.
really is like that willingness of like, you know, I'm sure you're familiar, if you haven't read it, of James Carson's idea of finite and infinite games.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if you're listening and not familiar, the idea being like a finite game has a beginning and an end and a winner and a loser. You know, like a single game of basketball is a finite game. You know, someone's going to win and lose and it ends. And an infinite game is you're not playing to win or lose and it never ends. You're playing to keep playing
Yeah.
and to improve the game for everyone else. I think that's an important piece there. And everything that we really care about in life is an infinite game.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, parenting, finances, your health, all those things, like they are infinite games. You don't win
Yeah.
or lose. Like your romantic relationships, it's all you're playing to keep playing. So the question is not how do I win today? It's what does it look like to show up to practice?
Yeah.
And I think coming from, I was a competitive athlete for a really long time in 2 different sports. And so that really works in my brain of like show up to practice. Like you don't compete every day. You don't max out every day, you know, and being able to look at it that way and like, okay, put in the reps, trust the program, follow the process. Like it can't not change.
Yeah. Yeah, amen. One, congratulations on completing that. I started it and I did not finish it. Um, and
And there's still
uh,
even benefit to that. I'm sure you still learned a lot.
100%. And I had a moment of like really discerning that like in this moment, this isn't the thing for me,
Yeah.
and it felt right. But
Uh-huh.
for anyone who's unaware, like it's a really big feat what she accomplished. Honestly, the reading list, it was quite intense, and something that I think is really important to highlight is like that moment of before starting it where you had all these stories about your learning process, your capacity to learn.
Hmm.
Something I've been thinking a lot about. Like, I think because so many of us have been wounded by the Western educational system, so many of us have some sort of story around our ability to learn new things,
Hmm.
to be um, to be in a new area of our like developmental edge. And I think a lot of us have a lot of wounding around commitment and being in that kind of container. Some people don't, but I think a lot of people in our culture do. And
Hmm.
so I just like think doing something like that is so potent because how clear of an access point it becomes for like some of those stories and some of those like demons around your ability to learn, your ability to commit and see things through. So congrats. And I'm curious because to me it feels, I'm just curious if this tracks for your experience. It feels to me like the truth telling initiation, when that started, that was like a new horizon kind of like starting to stabilize at this. Whoa, sorry. It's my mom's computer. Stabilizing at this new octave of being. Um, but then it feels like the MF game was like the next launch point for you.
Hmm.
And like you're saying, now you're a big part of this community. Now you're doing the TA, and it really feels like that was like a big domino to fall for you doing the MF game.
Hmm.
Does that feel true for you?
Yeah, and I think, you were asking earlier about the arc, and I think the piece that came into resolution for me was it is one thing to keep your word to yourself privately, and it is
Yeah.
another to be seen trying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the connections and the opportunities and the ideas that we want are on the other side of being seen trying.
Yeah.
And it's vulnerable. And that doesn't necessarily mean social media. It might mean in real life, it might mean in your friend circles. But I think being able to be seen in the messy middle of that, like it comes right back to those same conversations of why we trust someone more when they set a boundary with us.
Yeah.
When we watch someone be in that relationship to themselves and we feel
Mm.
safer around them. Right? And I think it built so much for me that, I was showing up consistently and people were watching me share about like falling off or not understanding what I'm reading about, or, that it built so much trust there. And from like an entrepreneurial standpoint, I had nothing to sell that whole time. I was not selling
Yeah.
anything. I was just sharing my process. And
Mm.
because I was really consistently showing up and people got a feel for me and my voice and my thoughts, I got from a place of like, I didn't have like a following on social media. I had like my homies followed me and I
Yeah.
was sharing on stories, so there's no reach, right? But every now and then somehow like random strangers would find it. And I started being that random strangers were like watching this stuff every day. And then when I got to the point where I had things to share or offer, I had built all this trust,
Yeah.
right? And I had demonstrated to people like my willingness to like, yeah, reveal myself of like, this is what I'm going through and this is me in process. And I think that is such a beautiful way to build that trust with anyone, is
Mm.
to allow yourself to be seen before you think it's done,
Yeah.
and whatever you end up doing, you'll wish you started documenting it sooner. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that that was a turning point for me of like my fear of being seen, of putting that out into the world and having people see that. And absolutely, you get weird messages if you choose to do that. You're going to get responses from people who disagree. And like,
Yeah.
then you don't die and you handle
Yeah.
it and you keep going. And it really was this turning point of like me initially telling the truth from a place of avoidance and like, I don't want to feel shame, to
Yeah.
like, I want to bring other people into this bubble. I want to share where I'm at. I now want to connect with people who are interested in these things.
Mm.
And so it took it into, frankly, I have friends for the first time in my life.
Wow.
I don't say that facetiously. Like, I mean that quite literally. That was not something that was available to me in like the previous way I was showing up in my like younger life, and especially before my accident. I have a community of people. Right? Like, I host events. I have people around me. Like, that is not something that was previously like in my life at all.
Yeah.
And it's so vulnerable, right? Like, being seen in your shit and in your messiness and in like all those things. And it's beautiful, and people now like grant me the same thing of allowing like me to see them. And it really did come from, me committing to what I was interested in.
Yeah.
Right? Because then you find other people who are doing that. You find other people who want to tell the truth and to have like, that are also trying to follow their whispers. And that's not something I ever got from pretending to be interested in things or pretending to know more than I did or holding back what I wanted or needed. And like truly the things that have become available for me in like both creatively, entrepreneurially, but also in connection, like in like romantic relationships and in friendship is like if I think about it too hard, I will cry. Like, it's so beautiful and a type of like connection and fulfillment that I really didn't think was ever going to be available to me.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. I have a technical question here, and then I want to get into your
Yeah.
artist profile,
Yeah.
which won't take too long. But something that, because I'm kind of on a similar precipice of commitment within God's New Day, of course, just like really wanting to commit to kind of a big project of research, what he's calling the Dharma dissertation. Something that comes up for me when wanting to commit to something like that, where part of the commitment would be similar to the mentally fit game that you did, where it was like daily studying, daily like active recall through posting, this sort of thing. And something that I'm feeling into that maybe you can resonate with that MF game time 7-month period is like, that's not how you're going to live for the rest of your life. Like that routine, that was that moment. That was a season of intensity. And so in just like being able to recognize that this isn't how I'm going to live for the rest of my life, and this is this season. And this is going to be a really important season when I look back on my life, and then the willingness to surrender to that. And, maybe it's like your centers of gravity in the ecosystem of your life completely shift, because all of a sudden that's the thing that's the most important is this is the checklist, is the studying, is the posting. And so maybe you're starting to say no to more hangouts or certain things like this because you know that this is what has to happen. And so I guess for me, part of the edge that I can feel sometimes when wanting to commit is like, that like fear, like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do it every day? I'm going to have to, how am I going to make this happen? And I think it's partly it's like the fear of some of the the change in my decision making process that's going to start to need to happen, because all of a sudden this is the most important thing. And I guess the part two of that is just realizing that, okay, this maybe isn't the whole rest of my life, but I'm in a season of my life where I know that this is the thing, and like, I guess surrendering into that. So yeah, I'm curious if you could speak to that.
Yeah, the piece that I think is often at odds with like pop culture wellness is the reality that all progress is made by temporary overreaching. That is true physiologically, that is true emotionally, that is like progress is made by temporary overreaching. Right? And being able to trust that and to go into seasons of, I'm going to do this thing really intensely and I'm going to make sacrifices and trade-offs, and being able to do that and look at the time horizon of balance a lot longer. And that the days that I am prolifically creative, I am so sedentary and I might not have eaten or showered. But like on a 10-day scale, I do all of those things enough. And if I am super in the pocket with something I'm working on one day, and I'm like, oh, but I also need to like journal and meditate and go outside and walk and do this and that, like, because my day needs to be balanced and have this whole like perfect 24-hour routine, I won't create as well. And that's fine
Yeah.
if that's the choice I want to make, and maybe it's a season of having balance. But if I'm leaning into creating art, there's going to be moments where other things fall by the wayside. And
Yeah.
being able to have the discernment and the support systems that you're not like blowing up your life, but that you can lean into things temporarily, that is how we make progress. And if you look at the
Mm.
people, like, and this is, I think, true for anyone, not just you, of like, if you look at the people you respect and how they got good at the thing they're good at, it involved some like myopic, like evil genius type, I'm gonna get into this thing, you know? And I think we're so afraid of that, and like as a collective, I was like, well, what does that mean? And who will I be? And I think that's where a lot of like the goodness comes. Even if you don't finish the thing, or even if you don't get to the outcome, being
Yeah.
able to trust like that we can pour ourselves into these seasons, and
Yeah.
that you're not beholden to it. You can stop any time if it's not working for you. But what if this time you didn't?
Yeah.
Like you've tried that before. You've committed to big things and not done it. We know what that feels like.
Yeah.
Like we all have. And
Yeah.
being able to have that moment where it's like, yeah, there will be trade-offs. And in a big way, that's the point.
Hmm.
It feels very cliche of like, oh, it's about the process, not the outcome. But maybe I can try and use different words so it lands better of, you know, it's not about you posting every day or you even like studying that stuff. It's like, who do you become as someone who is willing to orient towards the work that is important to you, and the part of you that knows that you are maybe currently like underutilized or underemployed or underpaid or underexcited,
Yeah.
and that maybe this experiment is worth that, and maybe you'll learn some skills or find a new piece of yourself. And
Hmm.
yeah, it is that willingness again to like those underworld journeys of like trusting the falling away. And that for me has been so scary, and kind of pulls us back full circle to as I was finishing the MF game and I finished that process and I was in mentally fit and it was this like whole beautiful thing. Right after that, my whole life fell apart again. And it was so scary because I was like, I've just built this whole life and all these people think highly of me and I'm good at things and I just did this impressive thing and my business is set up for this. And it was so clearly like, can you set it all down again? Because you could do it when you didn't like your life. You could do it when you didn't respect yourself. You were happy to walk away from that past version of you. But can you
Mm.
do it even when you like what's going on? Can you do it when it's
Yeah.
rewarding, right? And you've got that golden handcuffs of life looks good right now. I want to hang on to it.
Mm.
And yeah, like life continued to throw me curveballs. And I had somebody say to me, the more you let go, the better it gets. And there's so many parts of me that are like, you know, but
Don't
it's
think so.
true. And
Yeah.
it's and so being able to trust that it's
Mm.
everybody is down to like shed the old life. And I'm around a lot of like the astrology people who are like year of the snake last year. Nobody wants year of the snake when shit's going well,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
let's get honest with ourselves here. It's not just about like leaving behind your whatever, like your maladaptive thought patterns. It's also leaving behind the stuff that got you here and that feels good right now if it's getting in the way of what wants to happen next.
Mm.
And so I think trusting that of like that it is like safe and okay to restructure our lives, and that even when that time passes, like you will make new connections, and if people fall away, like it will be okay, and that we will survive, and that in putting ourselves in those positions, we connect with new people who are down for that game and who want to be on that road with us. And I
Yeah.
wrote this piece recently, and one of the closing lines of it is something about, as we're like setting out on this like dark road, eventually, finally, when we finally commit to like walking down the dark road alone, we find that like, oh, there will be other people walking with us and looking to find
Mm.
us. And there will be people to help you light the lamps and stories to make the night go by. And
Mm.
somewhere between the laughter and the tears, you realize that the only prerequisite for finding the right company was the willingness to be alone.
Mm.
And that willingness of like what we've talked about again and again, can you let it all fall away? Can you create space when you don't know what's coming? Can you commit to the thing when the loss feels bigger than the gain? But there's something there. There's something juicy that you're interested in. I think that's a piece of the truth, is can you trust that before it makes
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Wow. Did you read that at the DAC retreat? Because I feel like I've definitely heard that line recently,
Where have I shared that?
or maybe on your Instagram.
I shared some piece of it somewhere recently, maybe in an open mic or something, but it's a
Okay.
piece I'm still like working with and playing with, so it's top of mind right now. But
I
yeah,
love it so much.
yeah,
Okay, so we're gonna shift gears really quickly.
yeah.
Artist profile time. I'm so curious to hear about um, what routines you have in your life. So I know that you have Matrix Monday, which I am a newbie to, but I am really enjoying it. So all of the things like Matrix Monday, how do you organize your time? How do you balance the different areas of your life? Have you found specific routines that you consistently are resting into?
Yeah, for me, again, I have to take that like bigger time horizon.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing in my life happens on the daily. Zero things. I have
Mm-hmm.
zero daily routine.
Okay.
Right? And part of this is also recognizing I'm a woman, and that is just we are not on that 24-hour cycle. Men are, and so sometimes daily routines can work way better for men. You have a 24-hour hormonal cycle. I have a 28-day hormonal cycle. So being able
Mm.
to trust that as well, that sometimes that differs. But for me, some of those things that I do, he's referring to Matrix Mondays, is my practice of doing all of the like in my life matrix tasks like finances and insurance and like just in the world adulting stuff I try and do on
Yeah.
Mondays. But outside of that, my routine is to do what I call moving at first nudge. And so I have set up my life in such a way that I trust the first thought. I also trust everyone else's first thought, and that's often what I'm trying to help people tune back into is there's a moment where I want to write. There's a moment where I want to do the laundry. And then there's a thought that comes right after it that is like, nah, no thanks.
Yeah.
Um, but if I can move at first nudge when I have the idea or the inspiration or the desire to do the thing, it's not hard to start, period. It's hard to start after you've pressed snooze.
Yeah.
And I get so stuck in that. I'm like habitually very swampy as a person. And so I, over years, was like, what can I do to set up my life in such a way that when I want to go, I have space to go? And so that
Mm-hmm.
often means like handling things. And that's the like systems, very organized part of me. So that the rest of the time when I'm excited about something or I'm just like, ooh, I think I want to go to this coffee shop and write for the next 7 hours, I can do that. You
Mm.
know, most of the time, like my life is set up in such a way that like it is very spacious, it is very flexible, so that I
Mm.
have the ability to tune into like what wants to happen right now.
Yeah.
And that took years and was intentional. It was
Yeah.
just like two things I often have to remind people because they're like, wow, that's very privileged. Like, it's very intentional.
Yeah.
And it was not always that way.
Mm-hmm.
But within that flow, I go back and forth between, frankly, what I call like creative mania. And I will have moments where, you know, I'm just kind of in the groove of life and I'm just going along. I'm like, okay, I'll just take good care of myself. I hit the gym, I go outside, I get my sunlight, I'm doing all the things, and I just like take care of the animal human vessel. Make sure
Yeah.
it's nourished and like give it all the things, do some social stuff, go out into the world, you know, contact the world so that there's like new content going into the brain, go see some people. And then
Mm-hmm.
every now and then, I just drop into this place of like, I'm not going to talk to anybody. I don't want to leave my house. I'm going to stay up all night and I'm going to work on something. And to give myself the ability to do that without damaging my health, I'm pretty
Yeah.
dialed on things outside of those moments so that I
Wow.
can then stay up until 3 a.m. and not like decimate my week. Because normally I'm
Okay.
going to bed at like 9
Yeah.
and I'm like dialed on my food and I'm doing all the things so that then when something comes into my life and I want to like ride the wave, I can do that for pretty extended periods of time. I've got the energy, I've got the focus to do it. Like my life is set up and things are handled. So it's not like, oh, I'm so in the pocket and now like I need to go and do my car registration or whatever.
Yeah.
or like this thing that has to happen today that I just didn't handle, And so being able to have enough of that stuff handled and like trust the emptiness and the time when I don't feel inspired or creative, which is sometimes very long stretches of time, that it'll come. And
Yeah.
like, creating opportunities for like the muse to come knocking and to have regular moments where I sit and I write, and sometimes it's just like garbage and whining and self-pitying and annoying, and often most of the time, and then every now and then some real good comes out,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
being able to, yes, that really is like, it's sort of routine and lack of routine, I really think like discipline is the access to freedom, and
Mm.
being
Mm-hmm.
able to have the skill set that I created with knowing like I can do those things every day.
Yeah.
And although, like you said, I'm not living that way forever, I've also learned I'm very capable of doing some of that. And I know how to right the ship, that I know like the protocol when I've gotten really off track. Like, okay, like let me bring this particular type of structure back in for a few weeks.
Yes.
So I think that's really been that
Yeah.
piece of being able to have enough structure and like things handled so that I can follow the flow, and to
Yeah.
also be able to read the room when it's like, oh, I've gotten off track. Like, what do I need? Like almost like
Yeah.
little self prescriptions of
Yeah.
discipline to, turn around the cruise ship.
Yeah. This is great. It's making me think about something that I have thought of in my own life, and I think about it like a vehicle. And so, like, I go into these seasons where I dial in kind of like a routine habits to the point where it is autopilot. Um, and I think part of the resistance that I've felt in other people sometimes when I'm maybe talking to them about doing something like this is that all of a sudden that's going to become them for the rest of their life every single day, period. And it's that feels like a contraction.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing you say is that it's like it's a tool that you can come back to when you need to, and it's also something you can veer off of when you want to, when the muse is here. And so it's like for me it's like this vehicle in the garage that I can come and ride in on autopilot whenever I need to because I've done the reps. But I think, I mean, maybe part of what the MF game for you did was like help develop that vehicle, or like different seasons like that where it's like you have had seasons where you've put the reps in over and over to the point where you have that tool integrated within you that you can use whenever you want to use it.
Yeah, and I think there's two things that come to mind for me there, and one comes up all the time, especially now that I'm teaching this course about bringing people through this journey of truth, which involves habit and routine change at one point. Um, we're all so afraid of being beholden to something. It's one of the reasons we're afraid to tell the truth. Because like this is true right now, but like not always. I'm not always insecure about this thing, and I don't want to tell you because then you're going to think that's always true. You know,
Yes.
we're afraid to make really honest art because we don't want people to think that's like all of us. There's all these
Yeah.
caveats and nuance that I can't explain. And like, well, I don't want to commit to this behavior because I can't do it forever. And like, what would that mean
Yeah.
if I did? Like, oh, like I'm just going to do this indefinitely. Is
Yeah.
again the containment. That's why I set time ranges for things, and being able to notice like we are being able to trust that not everything is forever,
Yeah.
and that like you're not beholden to any of this, and it's
Mm.
scary and vulnerable because it also means trusting other adults to know that,
Yeah.
and or trusting that like you don't need everyone to understand. But I think there are those pieces for sure where it can be scary to commit to anything because it's it's so funny because as if we could do it that consistently if we even
Yeah.
wanted to, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good piece to just call out too because I find those moments of levity like it helps, and like oh like I don't want my whole life to be around like posting stuff every day. It's like
Yeah.
it won't be if I tried, you know? And so whatever the behavior is. But I think this links
Mhm.
into the other piece that I thought of, which is like all these things that we talk about committing to, they take time and energy. Like you're giving something up and you're committing to this period of time, and that feels like a loss. And even like the word decision, like the root word decide means to cut off.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people see that and it's like, oh, I that's like commitment is limiting my options. You know, we see this even in like modern dating of like commitment is limiting options, where I see it as the option, or like the opposite rather. Like commitment is so freeing in so many different senses. And like even with behavioral changes that take time, we as human beings actually do better with a little bit of structure. I got
Yeah.
so much more done in the days that I had those commitments to those checkboxes. And
Mm.
once I got really flowing with it, because I kept going after I finished the MF game, I kept doing the checkboxes for, you know, the rest of the year. Um, Sometimes finishing those would take like 3 hours of my day, but it's like the most enjoyable parts of my day, and I'm dialed, I'm like in the pocket getting things done. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think there's also the piece of us that thinks that these things are going to like take up our time. It's like, okay, well, commit to things that it's like time well spent, that
Yeah.
you want to be doing. I think that's
Yeah.
where so much of the initial wounding comes from, is that like at some point in our life, in our church or our family or our school, we were asked to put like the energy of devotion behind something that we don't care about. It's why
Yeah.
people have a bad taste in their mouth with the word discipline, but like
Totally.
discipline is like delightful. It feels great when we can stay in that and have it be this relationship to something that we care about.
Mm.
Discipline just sucks when you don't care about the thing.
Yeah.
You know, and like otherwise it becomes this relationship and this thing that you come to know yourself in. And you do something consistently, it's like, well, how does this behavior that I do every day, how do I feel today in it? It's like this yardstick that you know yourself by, and it can be such a
Mm.
beautiful thing when we clear out all those cobwebs and go through the initial like pre-work of getting to know like what we want to commit to.
Yeah. So well said. Last question. I got to hear
Mm-hmm.
about these 3 a.m. nights. Is this something that, because I don't have that same thing where like I'll be
Mm-hmm.
writing until 3 a.m., but I'm very curious to hear that. Is that,
Yeah.
yeah, tell me about the 3 a.m. nights.
So almost always, so I, although I call myself a writer, really I'm just a talker because I do it all by dictation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will get into the flow. Usually it's I'm writing poetry because I get really locked in with that. And it usually starts with me just, I dictate, I use an app called Whisper Flow, and I just like talk to my computer and it gets like the first draft down. Or I'll say it out loud enough times and I write it down if I don't have my laptop. But then I get into the flow of writing one, and how I write poetry is I keep rereading it to myself out loud. And I'll reread the last few lines and just be like, okay, what wants to be next? And I just get into a rhythm with it. And so it requires me to then say the whole piece out loud, like probably hundreds of times, which is also how I go about like memorizing long pieces that I'm going to perform.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
but it's like once I find one of those threads, it's like, this is all I want to do. Like, I don't care about tomorrow. I'm not even going to be tired tomorrow because I'm going to be stoked on this thing I just read. And
Yeah.
like, it's so wild because once I get into that, I can be tired. I can have had a long day or like be upset or like spiraling about something. It's all gone. And I'm like, I'm so stoked on doing this thing. And like, poetry doesn't make me any money. It's not like there's no like impetus behind that for anything other than like I enjoy doing this. And then I'll
Yeah.
get into it and just like keep reading it, and then like the energy's flowing in my body, and it's so worth it to me. And it's almost like I can't stop until it's complete, you know. So I will just like work with the thing until, you know, it runs its course, and then coming back to it the next day. Often, like sometimes I'm tired. Obviously, I'm human, but oftentimes I'll come back to that piece and be like, "That's dope." Sick, and I'm like lit up by it, and like it carries
Nice.
me through the next day, and then I get back into my
Yeah.
routine of like, okay, let's take care of things, let's make sure I'm, you know, like mineral dense foods,
Yeah.
electrolytes, hydration, like
Uh-huh.
meat and fruit, you know. And like I get back into like that's the vehicle I lean into of like, let's get things back on track. And that to me, like those evenings are often like, they don't start from a place of like, yay, I feel happy and inspired. It's often like I start writing because I'm upset or like something's really hard. And then I just, if the more honest I can be and like say the thing I'm really thinking, not what I think will sound good, and I just find something and I'm like, ooh, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm big on like write until you surprise yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes I write a whole piece and then there's this one line that drops in and it's like, whoa, I don't know where this came from, but like this is why I wrote this poem. Is like
Yeah.
for me to receive this line from like God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, of being like, oh, this is what I needed from this. And usually
Yeah.
create some sort of like resolution in me. Um, and it's often the work that really like resonates with other people. is when I share that stuff, and it comes from like this really honest place. There's a lot of research that like we are our most creative at the opposite time that we are our most productive. And so whatever time, and like for me, I'm a morning person. I'm like down, I'll do like all my things early in the morning,
But
and
you're
I
not
want to go to
more
bed. I want to,
productive, not so creative.
yeah, I want to go
Interesting.
to bed at 9 o'clock. I'm tired. I want to wake
Yeah.
up at 6 a.m. Like I'm a morning person. But
Nice.
in the evening, every night, like creativity strikes, and like that
Okay.
trade-off is worth it to me.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah, the nights
yeah,
where sleep doesn't matter at all because you're so just like invested in the creativity.
totally,
I love
totally.
that.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on here.
Yeah. I would love to give you the space to plug the people into all your stuff because I know you've got a lot of goodness going on. So let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, I have a number of different avenues. I'm sure we can get all the links plugged in below this.
For
I have
sure.
an Instagram that I share some of my more like raw, unfiltered thoughts with. I have a podcast that is called Root and Flame. I alternate between reading spicy poetry that will make you feel things and then kind of unpacking them. Um, and I am teaching a course that actually takes people through the quests that I took myself on in that truth journey. And we just started and then immediately sold out the first round. So we are locked into that for April. I'm going to run it every other month. So the
Cool.
next one will start on the first Sunday in June. And those are going to be month long containers, but people get to stick around in it afterwards. So I'm really excited about that. It's been super fun so far. People are like really showing up. I've been loving that. So, yeah, if any of this like touched you or you find it interesting, absolutely send me a DM on Instagram. I'd love just chatting about this stuff and getting into it. And I think we all crave more people who can like be in it with us, and I
Yeah.
do too. And people who are drawn to this work and who want to like have a space to just be human and to find themselves
Mm.
in that instead of trying to optimize and fix their way out.
Yeah.
Those are usually my people. So thank you
Yeah.
so much, Blake, for giving me the opportunity to come on here and to share. And I'm excited to keep getting to know you better too.
Likewise, you're a gift, you're a gem. There's so much here. We went for an hour and 47 minutes.
Oh
And
my gosh.
also for all the people still listening, if this didn't touch you, you're lying to yourself. I'm
Yeah, if
just
you
joking.
listened for this long, what are you doing? What are you doing?
But yeah, if you are still here, please leave a like, share it if it resonated with you in some way, and subscribe for more because I'm sure Zoe's going to be back on. And yeah, thank you so much again. It's been a joy to talk with you.
Thank you.